welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Kelly.
I feel like I haven't seen you personally in a long time, and there's so much to catch up with and connect with that I would love to talk to you for 3 hours. You just got married.
Yes.
You are one of the top, I would say, lifestyle and wedding photographers. Very big career. And you're bouncing around, you're traveling because you do a lot of destination weddings. But for everyone listening, give us just kind of your background. How did you get into weddings? Give us the whole story.
Yeah, so basically, I got kind of pushed into weddings on accident. My best friend was getting married, and I think just knew I was doing everything but weddings. Weddings was something that kind of, I think, just felt like a lot of pressure, but I was mainly focusing on fashion and lifestyle. And when she was getting married, I think she just felt like, you're meant to do weddings. And
she's like, I need you.
Yeah, and it was her second wedding, so I think there was a little less pressure and also, skinny budget. So yeah, she basically was like, you're going to do my wedding and you're the one I trust. And her faith in me, I think, just allowed me to experience a wedding, and that it didn't have to be so scary, and that you can attract the right clients. And I still was not planning on doing it. It was going to be a one and done.
Yeah.
But then it got published. The planner submitted it, and so that was out there on Style Me Pretty, and I was then getting inquiries. So
how long ago was that?
I guess, I hit 10 years last year. So yeah, Going into my 11th
10 years of wedding photography.
Yeah.
So, because your style is very much fashion forward. You can, not that they're overly posed, anything like that. Your stuff is, if anyone hasn't seen it, we're going to link and you'll see a bunch of her images probably, flashing up through the screen right now. But your style is very fashion focused. So how did you get into fashion photography?
Well, I feel I think that was just a passion of mine. I just really loved. I was, again, open to everything, but that's just something that really excited me. I guess I could go way back, but I'm kind of jumping ahead. I had the opportunity to work with Lauren Conrad. I was a monthly contributor on her blog. I had my own blog with a couple friends. And so kind of the writing had started, and then I had built into the photography aspect. And as she saw the photography, I think it was at a point in her career with her blog that she was needing more photography and more
and that
of
was
a
consistent. Her aesthetic was very light and airy, but also clean.
Yeah, definitely. And so it really helped shape my style. And I think she really helped also just get me in. She had a lot of faith in me. I think at the time she was like, wait, would you want to shoot for the blog? And I was really excited by that. And then she had other companies that she had me shoot for. Little Market and Paper Crown at the time. So I got to shoot a lot of Paper Crown had a bridesmaid line again at the time. So she really, I feel like I owe a lot to her in my career, in that I had a lot of amazing opportunities at a time that I didn't feel like I had any business being in the room, and her confidence in me really helped I guess find the confidence in myself.
And fast forward today, you are not only one of the most popular wedding photographers, but you're doing a bunch of editorial shoots. You've done Brides magazine covers. You've done it all. I know it's uncomfortable, but give us the highlight reel.
Oh.
Some of the things that you've done and how did that, because a lot of our listeners are wedding pros who are just early in their business, building out their brand, building out their point of view as far as their style. How did you really hone in on that?
Yeah, I think, so much of it was being inspired by each client. Everyone has such a unique love story. And so I think that my, like I said, early on, I was kind of shaped by that look of Lauren Conrad's, and then was able to kind of find my own voice as well. And but because I had done so many things leading up to finding weddings, I feel like my partner jokes, he was like, I'm like the Swiss Army knife where I could do a lot of, so I feel like weddings was kind of my, where I was meant to be. It was I got to be the photographer and the art director and the best friend and therapist and the choreographer. So it really just felt like, my lane. And once I kind of owned that, it just was doors sort of opened for me. But I think too, kind of having having like had some of those early things on my resume also opened me up to other opportunities, getting to shoot for, Bachelor franchise things early on, which also kind of helped with
that
social media.
You did so many of the Bachelor, Bachelorette contestants when they got married, engaged, engagement shoots, just general lifestyle shoots.
Right. Yeah. And also just got to work with some really inspiring people that, maybe weren't, like that was like, I just was excited to also kind of open up and not have it just be like reality stars, right? Because at a certain point I was like, oh, I hope I'm not getting into this.
Pigeonholed
into. And I remember shooting a wedding in Hawaii that went viral. It was just this really beautiful, like just the energy of their ohana, the family, the aspect of just this really candid and in the moment energy. It was a model and a surfer, like a pro surfer. And they just had I was just so inspired by their lifestyle in general. And it got picked up by Vogue. And I feel like that wedding helped me also kind of shape what I wanted to attract in the future of just like this really, and even in my life, like honestly, that wedding and them as a couple and their friend group was so inspiring to me. And so
you're like, I need to make this my new vision board. Like, how do I pull this into my life?
Yes, I need to start surfing. I was like, get me out there with a camera. I'm like, no. But no, they really were a couple that inspired me. And I think just the way I approach weddings too, right? Like they were so free. It was the less, I think back early in my career, it was very much that perfectly curated magazine, perfectly, just
a little styled,
very styled.
And
I loved how free and just like in the moment and the movement and the energy, and it just like transcended in the photos. And so that's, I think, what has also kind of helped shape the way I approach wedding days and photography, and what I like, also kind of like what I want to attract in clients to, ones that are really open to the spontaneity and just really in the moment, because that's where like the heart and soul of the wedding day and like, where the best photos live,
How would you describe your style now? So if it was more kind of curated and styled before, like, is it more documentary?
Well, I got to a point, I guess maybe 6 years ago, that I started to I would say that I was really excited to dive into my craft more, learn more, deepen that. And I started picking up more film cameras, and I was just using them more as like my personal, personal travels and things like that. And as I gained more confidence in that and kind of more of a, understanding of these different mediums, I started to infuse that into my photography. And so I feel like my galleries are really dynamic. It's like having your best friend from high school shooting, on the point and shoot 35 millimeter camera that, it's more raw and more of the in-between, less curated.
More candid moments.
Yes. And it's like, I think people also respond differently when they see this little silly camera. They're kind of like also a little bit more silly and relaxed. So it just also it lends to just a more nostalgic energy, I would say, with the photos. And then fine art is just these beautiful creamy tones, really kind of that what you'd maybe blow up on your wall if you were, just like the really more the light's perfect. Everything's, I'll pull that out. And I feel like it is a little bit slower to shoot on, that medium format fine art camera. But I layer that in with my digital, which keeps up with the speed of the day of, how fast these, it's like these fleeting moments, families coming together, raw emotion. And I feel like with, capturing on all those mediums, it just makes for a gallery that it like, hits all the notes. So I would say they're very dynamic. I love to stay true to the colors so that it's timeless, that you can look back, 10, 20, 50 years from now and it doesn't feel dated.
What's so crazy about wedding photography is you can look at some images and know when that wedding happened. Like, that was very like 2017. That was very 2014, based on the way a lot of photographers will follow trends and like the really heavy sepia tones or the oranges was like and the more moody was also a vibe for a while. And don't get me wrong, I like fell into it, loved it, wanted it for my own wedding when I got engaged literally forever ago, but still haven't had a wedding yet. I was like, I think that's my vibe. I think that's what I want to do. And then as time passed, I'm like, oh my gosh, thank God that I didn't pull the trigger on hiring a photographer who that was their style, because I look back and it feels kind of dated, or not to like say that that's not, if that's your vibe, then for sure. But it was very much trend.
Yes. Well, and I think that's a really good point. It's so easy. Like you could look back at a certain, mason jar burlap, the date that
totally.
wedding happened, right? Like there's certain trends that you know exactly what era it was. So I think it's really important to not just follow the trends, because also by the time something's coming out in a magazine, it's probably already past, or like by the time you're planning your wedding, if you're using this image, it's going to be like a year and a half.
Totally.
It's like you're going to be on to the next. You might have, dress regret, or, some decision that you're like, why did I do that looking back? So I think it's really important that with your wedding, it's something that genuinely feels true to you, and also your groom. I think it's really good to check in with your partner. I shouldn't say groom, your partner, and make sure that it feels really aligned to you guys as a couple, as a whole. And and that's really important.
Hiring a photographer is one of the first things that couples check off on their to-do list, because a lot of photographers book up really far in advance. It's like sometimes you get the photographer before you book the wedding venue. You as a photographer who are in high demand, you're getting so many inquiries coming in through your website, through DMs. What advice would you give to someone who's recently engaged, who's trying to find their photographer, and reach out to them in a way that will elicit a fast response? Because I know that like there's so many inquiries, and it's hard to stand out. And also you don't want to overload with so much information. Like what advice would you give?
Well, first of all, I think a lot, you might have found them on Instagram, and I appreciate, people, like I even do it. I'll just go straight to like a DM. I'm like just in the moment. But I do think a lot gets lost there. I'm definitely not, I'm someone that will look back and be like, oh my gosh, how did I miss that? So I think it's really,
you get a DM, it's like you mark it as read, and then you forget about it. You forgot to reply.
Yeah, I think they only recently came out with the unread, and then they filter it sometimes if you're not following that person. So it's just easily missed. So I would say, reaching out on their inquiry form or email. And I think it is really nice to know a little bit about the couple, just a little bit of background. I mean, if we know the venue, or maybe they don't have all of that figured out yet, but typically we want to know a solid date and a venue so that we know if there's travel involved, because if it's just, we're still looking, I might not be able to kind of gauge if I'm able to do it because of other travel and things that you have to kind of consider. But I also love knowing why a couple is drawn to my work, why we would be a good fit, rather than just like, hey, what's your pricing? Are you available? Totally. Yeah, just like a little bit about the couple, Again, it doesn't have to be much, but it is nice to kind of have a sense for who they are and what's important to them. And but definitely on email.
and referencing, like, I saw this great wedding, and explaining what or how they were drawn into your work. So that gives you a sense of like who they are and their style, what they're looking for.
Yeah. I don't think that's, necessary, but I do think it's kind of nice just to kind of have an understanding of what it is they're looking for, to make sure I'm the right fit. Because I feel like there's so many incredible, talented creatives out there. And I just want to make sure that we're always a good fit for each other. And,
Well, speaking of fit, that is, I think, one of the most important things when it comes to hiring a wedding photographer is the chemistry that you have with the couple. How do you personally navigate that and feeling, is it just like a vibe that you get? Is there like a process that you go through?
Yeah. So I think that's the number one, like that's how you get the most natural photos. You want to feel like it's a friend in the room, someone that you not only trust, but just have, just feel comfortable around and you feel at ease with. So I would say that you want to love their work, but you also want to really just feel like you'd enjoy, being their friend outside of the process. And for me, I would say that like as I've gotten, more and more into the luxury market, a lot of times the planners, couples are really busy and maybe they don't have time for a video call, or the planners are handling all of it. So sometimes I don't even have the opportunity to meet the couple ahead of time, which is a little nerve-wracking. But I will say most of my couples do have multiple day events. So I at least will get, pieces, like we'll have little moments before the lead up of the, the full wedding day. But I do think it's really nice if we're able to jump on Zoom and just see if we're vibing. Yeah. I think that's really important.
So a lot of your referrals are coming from planners who are saying, hey, Val's your girl. She gets your style. She gets your vibe.
Yes. And I think that is really helpful knowing, because then I also understand the creative partners. I love working with new partners, and I feel like I find a lot of inspiration from that. But also it is really nice when you have a team that you trust and you already, can.
You've worked together before, you get their vibe, you know what to expect.
Definitely. And I think they also are helping guide couples into the right direction of maybe you didn't consider this, and, you should, this person really has, these qualities that I think you'd really, that would really be important to you, or really, just kind of bringing this curated list to the table rather than thinking, oh my gosh, here's 15 people. And, just it can be overwhelming being on the other side of it. I really feel like, there's so many decisions. Even when you already have your vendor team in place, there's so many decisions. So I have so much empathy for my couples and all that goes into
decision fatigue is real.
Yes.
It can even prevent you from making decisions. You're like, I don't even, that's kind of where I am and I was in the planning process. I'm like, there's so many options that how can I even possibly choose?
Oh.
And especially with vendors, like I have so many amazing vendors, friends that are planners, photographers, everything. So it gets really overwhelming for sure.
Definitely. Yeah. So I always think, if you're able to hire a planner first, they're your guide through the whole process. And I think that is a really, really important, person to bring on, because they'll be your guide and they're going to be the ones that maybe are curating that down for you. So
it's part of the budget that you should not be looking to save on.
Yes.
Super important. I do want to ask you and I were chatting before we started rolling the cameras about the shot list, because that is something that a lot of photographers kind of upfront are like, I won't take a shot list, or please provide me your shot list. I think the shot list is actually like a controversial topic when it comes to photographers. What's your kind of point of view on that? Yeah.
So I would just say, typically I want to know what inspires my couples. I want to know, what, who they are, and so that I can capture their day as best as possible, and we're, on the same page there. But I would say, when it comes to having this specific Pinterest shot or this,
like the cake or the bouquet. You're like, I know, you got that.
Him, the look down the aisle and, just certain moments that are just we'll get that, But for me, I definitely want to know the specific family shots, and that's important, because that's something that I don't necessarily know the dynamics of your family, and I want to understand that better. So again, we can best facilitate that and get through those quickly, but also get what we need. But for the rest of it, I just feel tossing out the window, really want to find that inspiration by the unique elements of your wedding day and your fashion and your family traditions and things like that.
And if you're hiring a professional photographer who has shot weddings and knows weddings, they know the shots that they got to get.
Yeah. And I feel I always find some of, the favorites of my own wedding, we had a full week, but were the unplanned moments. It was the spontaneous moments that you couldn't anticipate, that were just a dance party broke out in this, walking from this place to this place. And it's the most memorable thing for me. And it's you can't just put that on a shot list, right? We're going to have this. So some of it is just really leaning into being open and not married to something, because sometimes something more magical will happen when you have, you create time and, in the timeline for natural things to unfold.
For sure. Yeah. Speaking of family dynamics, you're capturing all of these unseen moments. I'm so curious as a photographer, right, watching all of these special moments happen. Have there been any crazy or uncomfortable things that you've captured that are surprising to you? I know that's I'm throwing you a curveball.
Yeah. Gosh, I mean, for the most part, every wedding day and family have things to navigate. Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I feel like it's always everyone in the wedding industry always says like I could write a book after, and I just feel a little put on the spot, Kelly. I don't want. I'm like I plead the fifth,
and also you probably block it out.
Also that for sure, because I think for me what stands out is always the highlights.
Yeah.
So there are times that I'm like, maybe having to separate, Uncle Jim and Aunt Sherry or whatever, or like there is that, but that's always kind of, and I'm happy to do that. And I always want to make sure, how can we make this as smooth as possible for the couple where they're avoiding any awkwardness of like, hey, we need a shot with this person and one without. But at the end of the day, like that's not really what stands out to me. It's always like
the highlight reel.
Of course. Yes. Yeah.
The amazing moments.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I do want to chat about your wedding, because just as someone who follows you personally on Instagram and seeing it unfold, and we have mutual friends who were also attending your wedding. Yes. It was not just a wedding. It was, like you said, a week.
Yeah.
Like, walk me through your planning process. Like, what? Yeah. You obviously hired a planner, or I'm assuming a lot of help.
Yeah. So, I mean, I feel like for us, I guess I have to take it back a little bit, in that like it's so important, like I said, to have your wedding should really reflect you. And I think being in the industry for over a decade, obviously I've seen a lot, and it's easy to have that like, it's a lot of it, not to say pressure, but there are those feelings.
Can say it is pressure.
Yeah,
there is
pressure. I feel like pressure from
stressful.
People. And, but at the end of the day, what I've learned that I love about weddings, and what I've seen with couples that have done it so well, and that really stand out to me, is they really, and I think also the pandemic freed people up from feeling like they had to do things a certain way.
Expectations kind of got lifted.
Yes. Yeah. And so I really leaned into, so my I guess I can say husband. I always am like my partner. My husband, Brian, has a company called Kin Travel. And that's actually how we fell in love. We grew up together. He was one of my best friends growing up. But we started making out after a trip that he had planned that he asked me to photograph. And anyways, these trips to me, there were these small group travel trips that were really invested in the local communities and regenerative, and just these really curated groups of incredible people doing really inspiring things in the world. And just that energy of being on this adventure with them, experiencing new things. It was just like, I wish I could just bottle up that feeling and have everyone understand what that feels like. And so for me, these kin trips were just what I would look forward to, and where I just felt like you could drop in with these people and, that you've never met, and just become a family. And like, literally that day you were like, we're besties. So I always knew that was my biggest dream, was to be on a kin trip for our wedding, and to just be able to experience that, that journey with a group of people, a small group. So we really got to sink in and have these moments that felt really grounded, and not just like blowing air kisses across the room, and, not really getting to experience your wedding. And then we just, it's like, here's this adventure, and we get married one of the days. But then when we actually felt like, okay, let's do this, because actually his company got paused during the pandemic. It's all
nobody could travel.
Yeah. So he had something else that then took off, and so he now does more like honeymoons and family travel, and he really specializes in safaris in East Africa and South Africa. And so I was like, hey babe, let's explore this, because that would be my ultimate dream, is to be on a kin trip, to go to Kenya, our favorite place in the world, to be able to take our friends on the adventure of a lifetime. There's so many beautiful places in the world we've been able to go, and I've been able to photograph. But at the end of the day, it's so important to have it really reflect like your story and what inspires you. And it's not just like, this is a pretty backdrop. Like, it really holds so much meaning to us. He lived in Kenya for 5 years. And we'd been going back for 7 years, taking people back. We'd met so many of our best friends on this trip. So to me, that was really important. And but if people are going that far, we really have to, we want to make it worth their time. They're taking away time from their babies, and leaving their jobs. And, we really had that we wanted to make sure that it was worth it. And it was like a bucket list trip that they felt like, oh my gosh, this is something we'll talk about for the rest of our lives. And yes, it was their wedding, but also it was one of the best experiences of our life. And that was what we were hearing after, which was so rewarding.
I mean, the photos, just like I said, I don't think the professional photos are out, but just the snippets that I think it was your personal camera that you posted a few images on your Instagram or in your stories. And
resharing a little.
Yeah. And the guests who were there, I mentioned we have a mutual friend who was there, and I was looking at the photos like, wow. And adventure is like the one word I would say for what it looked like. I mean, being able to take people on an experience once in a lifetime is like, what a gift. Like, what an awesome thing. And that is from what I know of what your husband's business was it was creating these experiences that were transformative, taking people to places that they've never been and engaging the local communities to create these super authentic experiences. Yeah. Because a lot of times travel is not that way, right?
And it can be really extractive. And, so that was something that was really important to us. And I think because we had already developed all these relationships there, it truly was only possible because of him already laying the groundwork and doing it so many times with small groups. I mean, typically it was like 12 people, 14 people we would take on these trips. So we had 60 on safari, and then we had 72 at the coast. So it was a lot bigger than we had imagined. And it was definitely
it's a big destination for how far away it is from the United States.
For sure. But yeah, it was a dream come true. Like, I can't even tell you how special it was. And just the feeling of, how magical it was. It feels like, I can't believe that was our special week,
Multiple days.
Yes.
Multiple looks. It looked like a magazine spread. Like, it was so just picturesque. And just from your background being a fashion photographer and you having your own strong aesthetic and personal style, like, what went into planning all of your looks? Did you have a stylist?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Oh my gosh. Well, and I want to first start by saying, like, actually one thing that that was really cool is I think I was getting married later in life. I've been shooting weddings for a decade. So, but I kind of just felt like there was a little bit of a part of me that felt like with, trying on the dresses and stuff, I just felt like, oh gosh, I don't want to, most of my friends have kids and they're on other places.
I feel chuggy trying on wedding dresses. I don't know why. I'm like, am I like 12? I don't know. It's such a weird experience.
Yes. And I've been, I don't know. So I just kind of felt like, oh, I should just go on my own, or maybe I'll invite someone to like one of them. I don't know. I just didn't want it to be, especially having not, it's like maybe once I find the dress. So, but I realized that one of the special things is like, my mom was kind of like hinting like, oh, well, are we, and I was like, I don't want you to have to fly out. I don't want to inconvenience you. But then we ended up going to New York. I could tell. I was like, okay, she's starting to, I'm like, maybe she like really wants to do this. And we had this really exciting opportunity. So Michaela was my stylist, Michaela Erlinger. She's incredible. She's based in New York. She mainly does like celebrity and, red carpet, but I've become dear friends with her. And so I felt really honored that she was my stylist. But she got a really cool meeting for me out in New York. And so I was like, Mom, actually, this would be a really special trip for us. We've never traveled just the two of us. And besides like, gymnastics and cheer events growing up. So I was like, what an incredible opportunity to be able to do this little trip. We have some family in New York. And I actually found most of my looks with my mom, which was amazing. So special to have that on the wedding day, to be able to be like, remember that moment? Like, that actually added to it. And I realized I almost took away from my own, like I was getting in my own way of feeling like, oh gosh, I don't want to inconvenience anyone. But it's like, no, this is a time to lean in, to feel celebrated. And it's also these, this is like a experience for my mom too, and other and friends. So it's like, don't be afraid to say, to create these opportunities. And some people can't come and that's okay. But I'm really upset that I almost took that away from myself and my mom. I almost deprived us of that experience. And so that was something that I was like really grateful I did. And And yeah, we got to see Michaela there and, go to we really hit the ground running. My mom was such a trooper.
How many stores did you go to or different?
I think we went to, 5. No, gosh, what am I talking about? Like 5 like bridal stores.
Yeah.
And then several other kind of designers that don't specialize in bridal, but I wanted to really incorporate non-bridal into my into the looks. And so it was honestly the highlight. Getting engaged was a highlight for sure.
Yeah.
But that trip with my mom was like a highlight of my life. Like,
how many looks total were there?
Oh gosh, probably. I can't even say. I don't know. Probably like 10. I mean, some of them were just on the wedding day. There were only 2, but actually 3 because it was so hot that we ended up in our swimsuits like real early. We were like, we're just going to dance in our swimsuits. It was like a sauna. And then we ended up in the Indian Ocean. It was crazy. So I kind of had 3, and I had my grandma. I had her vintage slip getting ready. So I guess that's 4. But throughout the course of the safari and stuff, we had, really cute little moments and a couple like intentional editorials. Like Michaela found this vintage YSL safari dress that was from the 1960s, and actually at Cotter's 1920s camp where we had the safari portion, they had this 1920s Rolls Royce that sat on a Land Cruiser chassis, so you can actually safari in this car, this like vintage car.
Wow.
And it's called Dugu Dugu. So we set up Dugu Dugu in the tall grass where, I'm dressed in this vintage dress, and it just felt like out of my wildest dreams. But she was so meticulous, Michaela was, about even like the laces in my shoes. Like, because I was trying to incorporate a lot of things I already had as well, because obviously that stuff can add up.
Gets expensive real fast.
Yeah. And I love vintage and like using things that were my grandmother's pieces and was so important to me. But yeah, she would, go down to like, okay, we need to swap those laces. We need to think about what the the lines of this, just so meticulous and so detailed and so loving throughout everything that I can't even tell you. Like, that was one of my favorite processes through the whole wedding planning journey. And then China Pope did all of my tailoring, and she took it to another level. Like, now I'm like, how do I get dressed without you? Again, she had like backup hooks and things in case something broke or whatever. Like, she was also so wonderful. And the amount of times I had to like keep going in for things, I was like, I'm so sorry, we have one thing. Yeah, it was so fun.
You brought up your engagement as being one of the highlights of this whole process.
Yeah.
Are you comfortable sharing your engagement story? Yeah. And also, can you just flash your ring because it's epic?
Oh, you're so sweet. Okay. It's like the Manicam or whatever. Yeah. Can you see?
I think so. We can see. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's really special. It was actually done by a friend here. It's like actually, I guess it's paired with my my wedding band now. But yeah, my friend Jen of Love Verte, sorry. She's dropped the love. It's just Verte. But she designed it with Brian, and I just love it because it feels unique but still timeless. And
you and I are ring twins because we both got the East-West going on, which I feel like was not very – maybe that is going to be a trend. People are going to be like, oh, that's so 2020. When did you get engaged?
2020, beginning of 2023.
Okay. Oh, so yours is okay. So maybe I was ahead of the time. I was a 2020 engagement, still no wedding.
Yeah.
But the East West, I think, is so. I love East West. So when I see it, especially with unique shapes, I feel like it just changes the ring and makes it so interesting. So did you design that with him?
Well, kind of, yeah. So I definitely had some input. One of my brides actually had a necklace from her grandmother I think it was her wedding ring, and it was marquee. And she changed it into a necklace, and she set it, the East-West way on a necklace. And it was around the time that Brian and I were really talking about getting engaged and thinking about that stuff. And I had a gold signet ring on, and there was this, she had this marquee necklace, and it was silver, it was like a platinum or something. And as I was doing the detail shots, I'm in the back, and my second shooter, I'm like, can you hold this over this ring? And I was like, oh my gosh. And I took a picture of it, and I was like, I just loved how different it felt. Mm-hmm. And then the East-West, like in this shape in particular, kind of reminded me of like adventure travel, the like evil eye and like that sign of protection. And we're so adventurous. It just felt kind of like symbolic of the way, like of our love and our love story.
And the way you live.
Yes. Yeah. And I loved the thin gold band. And I don't know, it just felt like it hit all those marks of timeless, but also a unique little spin. And then they were so sweet. I mean, because we worked with Jenna Verte, she knew our love story because she's like a dear friend. So she just kind of like helped inspire some other details, and they hid a little, but we call it like our little bioluminescent diamond, but it's actually a diamond with fluorescent qualities. And so under certain light, it glows. And we had our first kiss in bioluminescence. So that was like kind of like, like a little nod to that. It's so thin you couldn't describe it. So that was like our little, a little piece of our love story. And then I hid one in his wedding band, which was kind of a fun thing to surprise him with.
So sweet.
Yeah.
So what about the actual proposal? Did you know it was happening?
I mean, we had been together for over 7 years, and we've known each other since we were like 10. So it had been a journey. But at the same time, like I was, again, I've always been so focused on my clients and, but I just wasn't really focused on our own wedding. I just felt like I'm with my person, and that feels so good. And even if we don't get married, you're my partner, I would like to do that. And that is something I'm excited for, but I don't know. I just kind of time got away. But at a certain point when he was starting to bring it up, and I think he was at a place in his career and life that it was like, he was ready. Let's do this. He was ready, and was talking about it more. Then I was getting excited, like, oh, this is fun, So we had been talking about it enough, and we have a tradition of going away in January. It's when both of our our work slows down. So we always just travel, just the two of us. And we had a really big safari trip planned with my family the fall before. And part of me felt like, oh, I'm with my family and, we're on safari, which is our favorite thing. So I kind of thought maybe it would happen then. But I think he felt like, oh, I can't not include my own family. And I think the ring wasn't quite done. So anyways, it happened on this trip. So I had a little bit of like, I was like a little bit thinking like, I think it'll happen on this trip. And if it doesn't, like maybe we actually aren't getting married. But yeah, it was so spectacular. We started in India, and then we went to Sri Lanka and the Maldives. So it was this epic trip, like 3 weeks, and lots of safaring mixed in. We've always wanted to go on a tiger safari, so we got to do that while we were in India. And so we went on the tiger safari. The next day, we had a little bit of just hang out at the hotel, spa morning, relax by the pool, and then he ended up proposing in front of this beautiful. It was this really gorgeous palace we were staying at. It's called Fort Barwara, and anyways,
casual.
Yeah, it really was. I was like, where? But I can't even. I'm trying. Like, it was really in front of this little temple inside of the palace, so it just felt really like sacred and special. And a fun fact though is he had the because we're traveling so far with it, he had an Apple AirTag in the box to like not lose track of it. And
that's a good tip.
Yeah, but he forgot to take it out right before, so it was just hilarious. He opens it up, and I'm like, oh, 2 gifts, But it was so emotional and so special. And,
did you black out, or do you remember it?
No, I remember it. I mean, it was one of those things that. There was parts of it I feel like, oh my gosh. But yeah, no, I remember. I think he blacked out. Honestly, like I was right before it happened, I was like, oh, it's happening right now. Because I kind of felt like maybe.
You started feeling funny? Because I started to feel funny. I'm like, something's happening right now. I don't know what it is, if it's good or, I mean, it's good, but you start to feel like it's
and I'm
weird.
like, we've been together so long. Like, there's no chance I'm going to say no. Like, but I mean, all guys are like, come on, it's stressful because they want it to be perfect. And so anyways, he was really so excited, but also so nervous. And,
well, he did good.
Yeah, he did
great.
Yeah.
We do this on every single podcast. So, since you are a wedding professional, but you're also a bride.
Yeah.
So I want to get your opinion on like this hot take on these trends.
Okay.
And you can just say yay, nay.
All right.
There's no wrong answer.
Let's do it.
But I'm curious. How are you feeling about signature cocktails these days?
I mean, I say yay. I feel like, for me, it's like, I don't know, a featured cocktail is fun. Okay. Why not?
What about champagne tower?
Okay, so this one I actually almost didn't do because I felt like, oh, it's become a trend, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
I did one.
Hey, well, I think it's a fun photo moment.
Yeah.
And for us, that was one thing. My parents are such hippies. They're so chill that we were not going to do, or like that was actually something that they did that I was like, oh my gosh, how fun and fancy when I was growing up. So I was like, oh, I would want to do something like that. And then found out it was a beer tower. They were like, yeah. So anyway, so the joke was we were going to do like a champagne tower, but with beer. So we used Tusker beers, which is local to Kenya. And it was like a fun little nod to them and their relationship. So I think if it ties into, again, your story, yes. If it's just because it's a trend and you think it's, then I think it's a pass.
Maybe not. Band or DJ?
Oh, both. This is where if you have a good band, there is nothing better. It is just like electrifying. Like oh my gosh, it is so fun. Like I can't even explain the energy they bring. If it's a band that you're trying to do with a budget, go DJ for sure. But if you're able to do both, obviously, I think that just adds to the party and to like, again, maybe you can have a new outfit for that one.
What about one of the biggest trends we've seen this year is the content creator for those social moments. How do you feel about that?
I love it. Honestly, I think it is controversial. Some people feel like they're, maybe would get in the way or something. But I think also having been a bride, it's so special to also look back on very real, content. And then it just takes you back. There's something about that unedited, unfiltered, just really like raw, that just is so special. And if you hire a professional one who specializes in that, then they actually know the flow and they understand how to dance with a professional photographer, videographer. So I do think it's really important that like you check in with your photographer and videographer first and maybe even like have them have a conversation to make sure that they're not, interfering.
Stepping on each other's toes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we all have the same goal.
Yeah.
But it's nice to have, your friends and family for them to be able to be unplugged. So I am all for it. I've worked with Stacy of BTS Bride.
She's the best.
I am obsessed with her.
She was on our podcast last year and she just is like on it. She's a pro.
She's
She's figured out the way to get it done and it's so good.
Yes. And so normally I wouldn't have, it's something that I'm like, as soon as I met her, that was my first time working with one was her. And I was just like, girl, you're like my best friend. I'm obsessed with you. So,
and it's less pressure, I feel like, on the wedding photographer to have to do that too, because it's a completely different type of content that's being captured.
Definitely. It's like, everyone should stay in their lane. So, but that is something that I love. I love when I get to work with her and I actually recommend her to my clients now. So I'm all for it.
Okay. A few more.
Okay.
Wedding cake or desserts?
Again, like if you don't like wedding cake, then no, I think that's something you can pass on and do something like if you're more into, I think your guests are going to want something sweet.
What did you do?
We did do a cake mainly because Brian's family is very much has a sweit tooth and like wedding cake, they made it a point that wedding cake was something that like they look forward to at weddings. So I was like, okay, I can't just like
take that away from them.
Yeah, if it was just me, I'm more of like a savory, salty, so cheese.
Oh.
I was like, let's do the cheese wheels. I think that was a trend from like forever ago, but I'm like, that actually is
my sister had one at her wedding. She had a full cheese wheel, but it was so beautiful and so aesthetic, but that actually sounds delicious. It's very European as well.
Yeah, so that's more my vibe, but yeah.
What about the wedding party? How are you feeling about like having a bunch of bridesmaids, groomsmen?
So I have done it all. I personally opted just to keep it really simple and just have it be us and, have a few friends maybe get ready with us. But, it's tricky. You don't want to hurt feelings. You don't want to have it be something that is, I think it can cause a lot of stress, even just like what they wear.
Yep.
And people also, you want to, at least for me, it's like that people pleaser. You want to make sure everyone feels honored and special. And we have so many important people in our lives. And so I think, and so it can get kind of out of hand sometimes. Like I have shot weddings where it was like 42 in a wedding, in a full wedding party. And
I feel like I need that photo.
Yeah, I know. But, at the same time, we kind of had fun with it. But it can get, logistically, it can be really tricky and it can take away from other things. But again, if that is something that's important to you and that is like the energy you want, and then like go for it. But if it's more about like, oh, I don't want to hurt feelings, and if I put this person in, I have to put this person in, then I say like, nay. Like, it is, your wedding is, you know, it's about you guys and your love story, and you should do everything that honors that versus just, you know, doing something for someone else in that case.
Well, I feel like we could keep going on and on about your wedding. But I want to just ask you, just kind of as a wrap up, for any brides, grooms, couples who are getting married this year or are actively planning, what is your advice or words of wisdom as they're planning their own wedding?
Gosh, I think it's just kind of what we already touched on, staying true to you, checking in with your partner, making sure that things really feel aligned, you know, checking, is it just more of a trend or some sort of outside kind of pressure? Because I feel like, again, the weddings that really stand out or you're going to look back on and feel like, oh, that still really represents us, is if you did that, if it really felt like something that, you know, was about your love and what you know, the things you love and all of that. So I would say just stay true to you, and then you want people to say like, that felt like you guys. That was exactly how I would have imagined you guys doing it. And yeah, something you look back on and it's not just a trend.
It's so funny because our mutual friend that went to your wedding, that's exactly what she said, that the wedding was just so you guys and they had so much fun and that it was so thoughtful. So
that means
you lived it and breathed it.
We did it. And they were the best. Their twins were our ring bearer and flower girl. And it was so much fun. You know, they've been a part of our love story since the very beginning, and it was beyond special to have them there. And yeah.
Lauren was on the podcast.
I love it. I mean, yeah.
So we'll link to her episode.
Yes. I feel like you've had so many people on the podcast. Even one of my brides, Katie Austin.
Oh, yeah.
So I get to shoot her wedding coming up. So it's so fun to be able to like, yeah, see who you've had on.
In the circle. I love it. Is there anything that we didn't touch on that you wanted to share?
Advice you'd give for destination versus like local, or how do you make that decision?
Yeah. How do you make the decision of having a destination or something local?
So I feel like if you are the type of couple who is okay to go with the flow, with destination weddings, you have to kind of be up. You have to have like a guest, like a group of guests that is willing to kind of be up for the ride, and also vendor team that is up for the ride, because, you know, you can't anticipate things that are going to come up. And so if that is something that you are comfortable with, then I say go for it. And that's something we knew there would be things that we'd have to just like, well,
you got to know your crowd. Got to know your crowd.
With it. Yes, we're going to laugh that off. We're going to, you know, because I think the energy you bring to your day, your guests are going to mirror that. If you're feeling awkward or embarrassed about something, then they're going to be like, oh, is everything okay? But if you're just like, it's raining, or, you know, there's a cockroach on the dance floor. That happened at mine. I was like, what is happening? We're like, whoa, whatever. It's so hot and sweaty, and it's, you know, way more humid and hot than we imagined, but we're going to end up in the Indian Ocean. Like, that is the energy you need to make sure that you're like ready for, to kind of make those changes on the fly. And we were up for that challenge and up for that. And, but at the same time, if that's like, you're like, yeah, you know what, I want to make sure that it's a little bit more, I know exactly what to anticipate, then I would say staying local is probably the way to go.
This has been the Loverly Wedding Podcast. We are hosted by Kelly Khalil, produced by Shannon Dietrich and Jennifer Alvarado, edited by Terry Carmichael. Watch the podcast on YouTube by subscribing to our channel, and you can follow and listen to us on Spotify, iTunes, and every major podcast feed.